Look here, I have my own journal. I love it. This was a setup that has helped me for the past 5 years of just the three things that are important to me, not the to-do list, but something that really matters, something that I'm grateful for, something that I'm proud of, something that I dream of, and something that I pray for. Something simple but effective. And I just hope that it will help somebody out there no matter their journey. You can find my journal at lifewithfrancy.com/shop. The link will be in the description of the episode. Hello, and welcome to Life with Francy podcast, a place where you will find all kinds of conversation like mental health, self-love, self-care, trauma, hobbies, and more. With this podcast, I want to create a place where we support one another in business and personal life. Hope you enjoy this episode. Now, let's get the show started. On today's episode, I have the pleasure to talk to Douglas again. So, long story short, I had him a couple months earlier, and he had left the pot match community, which is amazing. And I always talk about it on my podcast, but then I couldn't find his profile, so I didn't have any information about him. And we did the interview, and it was great. It was really a good interview. But some mental health stuff came up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, my podcast is about mental health." So, like, can you come back? So now, welcome Douglas again to the show. Tell us, what is life with you?
Well, it's great to be back. First of all, am I going to get my hands on one of those journals? Because every morning I do those things, and
Nice.
that's part of my kind of ritual. Well, I'll say 6 out of 7 days. I take Saturday to sleep in, but this is also a mental health conversation too, because I got to a point where I was doing those things every morning, and it was taking longer and longer and longer. The list was getting longer and longer and longer,
Mhm.
that I had to wake up earlier and earlier and earlier to make sure I could complete the list and my morning routine before my daughter woke up.
Oh my
And then it was
gosh.
like I'm waking up at 4:30 in the morning and I feel awful all day and I'm stressed out and I'm exhausted. So at what point do you balance these really helpful tools with making sure you're also getting the rest you need and kind of living that healthy lifestyle that you need physically? So it was a good conversation I had to have with myself. But
Yeah, I love that. And that's why I do a night routine instead of a morning routine.
mm,
Because the mail lady got to go. So she
yeah.
wakes up, she takes a shower, and she's out the door. But then to detox from everything during the day, then I grab my journals, which I have my book bag right next to me with a bunch of notebooks. And then each journal is themed because that's how my brain works, where I have to separate everything. So I have my gratitude, forgiveness, blah, 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 blah. So I love that. But you have a book out, and I just want to know a little bit more about your story before we get into all of the stuff that you had told me.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. My book, Life Between Seconds, came out November of 2022. It actually comes out in paperback early 2024. So we're kind of right in between those things.
Yep.
But the book itself was actually this really great observation of myself on one, how to write a book, what it takes. So if anybody wants to be a writer out there, writing is simple but not easy. And it was a great teacher for me on how to get in touch with authentic emotion that I may have ignored or may have misunderstood before that. And the story is about a 20 something American guy and a 70 something Argentinian woman and the friendship they create while running from their nightmares. And then when the nightmares kind of show up in San Francisco where they're living, they have to decide, are they going to run again or are they going to face their nightmares together,
Mm.
right? With that friendship to kind of bolster their strengths. And part of it was there's a lot of it about how intergenerational trauma affected me and kind of was able to instill the character through that. A lot of it is about the fears that I had, but through the lens of my parents,
Mm.
right? For instance, with Sophia, who's in her 70s and lost her daughter, that's not a spoiler alert. You learn that very quickly. Loses her daughter during the Dirty War, the Argentinian Dirty War in the 1970s and 80s. Kind of looking at that, but what would my mom do if she was waiting for me to come home and I never did? How would that affect her? And now and I wrote this when I was in my 20s and I didn't have a kid. Now, as a father, I have a 4-year-old daughter. I'm like, I could not write this book now. It would be too hard for me to write this book now. I'm tearing up thinking about, what if my daughter never came home? And it's so much more difficult, but I'm glad that I was able to put myself in the mental space I needed to be in to connect with that character. She's one of the favorite characters I've ever written, because of that. And so there's this whole just journey on, what space was I in mentally, how it helped, how it hurt, but also this beautiful artwork that I was able to put out in the world because of it.
I love that, and like I said, the first time, just the brain, how your brain works, to put that. Because I asked you some questions about like fiction, because I'm interested, and you planted the seed where I'm working on my own, not for publishing yet, not for publishing yet, but just something to have a story, because there's a story inside of me, like I wants to come out. But yeah, how do you do that to like have the balance of writing the story and you how you get to know the characters?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely different now than when I was in my 20s. When I was in my 20s, I could sit in a coffee shop for 4 or 5 hours on my day off because I was working. Hey, how many people in their 20s work 3, 4 jobs just to pay the rent, right? I was working 3 jobs and doing grad school while living in San Francisco at the time, the most expensive city in the country. And so it was just massive. I'd had one day off from work where I don't have anything, and I would just sit in a coffee shop all day and just write, like power through everything. But by the end of that day, I was mentally exhausted. I'd kind of crawl back into my hole of an apartment. And I really do mean a hole. The thing was a box with a bathroom. I didn't even have a kitchen in the apartment. But it worked. It worked for what it was for.
Gotta love your 20s. You can
Yeah,
live
right.
in
When you can
anything.
put up with anything. Put up
Yeah.
with anything in your 20s, really. I could have eaten cardboard for a week and been fine in my 20s. But so it was this real drive to tell this story because the connections that I made in my head were I love to travel. I spent a long time traveling before I ever started writing this book. So I was in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I see the Madres de la Plaza de Mayo, which are a collection of mothers marching in the main square in front of the presidential palace, holding up signs. So they're silent. They're not chanting. They're not striking, but they're holding up signs or pictures demanding to know what happened to their children or their brothers or their fathers during the dirty war because they were taken. These family members were deemed dissidents and then taken away. And there's no information on what happened to them. Are they dead? Are they alive? There's a history that's come out along lately, especially, I think it was a movie called 1986. It won an Academy Award for Best Foreign Film this year. And it's basically about this topic of children being abducted by the government in Argentina specifically and being given to high ranking members of the political party. And then those members raise the children as their own. And then the parents are disappeared. And so people are still demanding, they still don't know about this. And now even grandchildren are involved, right? To demand what happened to my parent, like the people that were still around. So it just inspired me. It shocked me. I knew nothing or little about it at the time. And then talking with them, seeing them march, learning more about the story of it, I created the character Sophia. And then I was in Mexico City and I went to Frida Kahlo's house, which is now a museum. And she had 2 clocks resting in her kitchen. And one was stopped on the time that she divorced Diego Rivera, and one was stopped on the time that she remarried Diego Rivera. And I was so in love with that concept of stopping clocks on really impactful moments that these memory or these ideas kind of coalesced into, well, what if I write this and she's feeling this and he's feeling this and he does this and she does this, and the story just like you said, you have this story that wants to come out, and that was a story that started building, and I needed to share it even though I didn't necessarily have a beginning or an ending. I just had these two people and this understanding of they meet, there's a friendship, and what does that look like?
I love that. And then you had mentioned traveling,
Yeah.
that you involve that as well. Sorry, you threw me off again because like I already know so much about you and I try to act like like I really don't know anything about my guests, but this time this is just like, hey man, we're just catching up. But no.
Right.
Yeah, tell us how you involved that traveling as well.
Yeah. Well, I lived in Europe in college. I took a year and I lived in Italy. And so for the whole year I was there. And I just, if anybody's traveled, whether it's across state lines or out of the country, you have this sense of awe and appreciation. And that was the big thing. I felt that. And so the travel bug bit me. And it was just, how can I continue to have that sense of awe wherever I go? And this is actually part of the problem with travel. I have a history of depression. So especially in high school, it was really bad. But then in college, I would have these really high highs and really low lows, and I still do. But part of that comes from chasing that dragon, that sense of awe that you feel when you first arrive in some place, and everything is new and everything is exciting, and then all of a sudden it drops, and then you feel that sense of dread or displacement, and then you're like, oh no, and then you don't want to get out of bed or talk to anybody for a week.
Mhm.
Uh, so I lived in Europe. I came back. I needed to travel more. I finished college and I was like, okay, I'm going to travel again. So I took another year and I just kept traveling. I just went east. I just kept going until I got back to the States. And then I had that sense of dread again. I had no direction. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I still didn't have this understanding that I could be a writer and that could be a career as opposed to needing to work in a bank, which is it's not a problem for people who want to work in a bank. It just wasn't for me. I didn't want to do that, but I didn't know what I could do. So then I went to South America, and then I moved to San Francisco, and then I went to Africa because again, I just like, how am I going to do it all? And there's so much I want to see, but what if I settle down and all these things? But then I would have these high highs of going there and exploring and seeing all these incredible things and meeting all these incredible people and learning so many new things. And then I'd fall back into that low space and have to figure out, well, what's next? What am I doing? How do I bring myself out of this space? And it has a term, it's usually termed reverse culture shock, when it's like you go there and you have the culture shock of being in that space and it's so new and so different, where it can give you that sense of awe, but it can also give you that sense of rejection or sadness. And then coming back to the familiar, and then all of a sudden that sense of awe is just ripped away. But I tried to channel that into the writing, right? So like traveling in South America and going to Buenos Aires and seeing the Madres de la Plaza de Mayo, or I became a travel writer and trying to channel all of my experiences into articles and essays or information for people to have and to understand so they can do the thing that I did. So writing is not just a creative outlet for me, it's also a way for me to kind of deal with my mental health.
Yeah, do you want to share a little bit more about your story when it comes to your mental health journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely call it a journey because it just seems
Mm-hmm.
never ending, right? And that's okay. I think part of that journey for me is that appreciation, not feeling like there's a finish line. It's a
Mm-hmm.
constant, like it's not a hamster wheel, right? But there is a constant ebb and flow, more like a tide, I guess. It goes in and goes out.
Yep.
And so I think I was 12 or 13 when I like really understood that I had depression. And at the time, there was a lot going on, a lot of family changes. My mom was diagnosed with cancer and she's healthy now. It's been
Thank God.
23 years, 24 years. Yeah, which is
Wow.
great. But especially at the time, late 90s, early 2000s, like I'm not saying this in a good way, but nowadays it seems like everybody definitely has been touched by cancer in some way, right? You or
Mm-hmm.
someone you know, a friend, a family member. But it also feels a little less because of that. It feels a little less scary, I think, now than 20 some odd years
Yeah.
ago. And
Yeah.
like
A
you
hundred
had cancer
percent.
27 years ago, it's like, oh no, like that means it's the end, wave goodbye. And that was terrifying. And cancer still is terrifying now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not diminishing that, right? But so it was around that time, and then all of the hormones and all of the chemical changes in my brain because I was becoming a teenager, right? And then all of these things are mixing and I don't know what's going on and I'm just not able to really focus in school. I'm having behavioral issues against teachers and I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure any of it out. And looking back, that's normal for a teenager, right? But it came with this then other utter sense of inability to cope, inability to move, inability to make decisions. And that's what my lows look like. And so I'm a very friendly person. I'm very gregarious. I love talking to people. I love going out into the world. I mean, our conversation, I hope people hear it. Like it's like catching up with an old friend, even though we've
Mhm.
only had one other chat.
Yeah.
But that's part of it is I'll have these really high highs and these really social, these great social interactions. And then, the next day I might sink into bed and I can't do anything. And so there's still this balance that I have to remind myself of give myself grace, give myself time, give myself the ability to recuperate, knowing that I can't just force myself, which is a lot harder now when I have a kid, right? So it's my wife and I, like, we know when it's coming and we feel it and
Mhm.
we kind of discuss, but sometimes that's not an option, right? She has to go to an office. She has to go to the office. I work from home. I take my daughter to school. I pick her up on those days. I have to get myself out of bed, no matter how hard it is. And sometimes it is, yeah, I just want to take the bed with me.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I get that. I
Yeah.
get that. I carry a blanket like literally. If I'm like really, really bad to go to my friend's house or whatever, I will grab my pillow and my blanket just like a child. And it's like, leave me alone. I'll come and visit you, but you gotta let me be me. And I myself deal with 7 mental health diagnoses because I just couldn't have one. I had to
Yeah.
have multiples.
Why settle for one?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And when depression comes, it was anxiety that helped me create a survival kit. That's what I call it.
Mm.
And it's just for anxiety, it's like a deep breathing, walking it out, dancing it out, depending, asking for positive, prayers and thoughts and everything, calling Jesus. So that's for my anxiety.
Yeah.
But I tried to do that with depression and it didn't work. It didn't fit. So I understand when you say you want to take the bed with you because there are days that that's it. You do not want to get up. You know that you have to do stuff. You know that you have people that love you. You know that what is in your head is not real, but at the moment it feels 100%. So then I learned that my survival kit for depression is then feeling the feelings,
Yeah.
Because one time I scared myself because I cry so much. And then at the end of the crying, I just laugh my ass off, excuse my
Yeah.
language,
No, not at all.
because I was just like, oh, I survived that. I literally thought that I was going to die from crying so much that I couldn't. It hurt so bad. And then at the end of it, I just laughed so hard because I was fighting it so long because I thought that by crying, like something was gonna happen, especially in my family. It acts like you're just gonna break apart if you're crying. And it's a sign of weakness depending on the family member.
Yeah.
Because for my immediate family of mom and dad, crying is a superpower. So I appreciate the way that I was raised because
Yeah.
now I can put that in my survival kit of like, oh, depression come in. I need to feel the feelings and all of that. I love the male perspective and the parent perspective because life does changes and I used to allow myself in my 20s to keep the pity party and depression mode for like not allow myself, but pretty much be in it 100%.
Hmm.
As of now in my 30s, that I'm the male lady during the day, a podcaster at night, and I got 7 people in my household, it's more of like, okay, well, you got a time. You're gonna have an hour of like you're gonna feel the feelings and whatever. And journaling helps for my depression to get those feelings out. Do you have like some type of survival kit? when that season comes?
I do journal and I do walk. Those are two things that I feel are incredibly helpful whenever that feeling comes up, but also feeling the feelings. I, that's absolutely something. And it is something that I struggle with because of the societal norms and the cultural norms
Mm-hmm.
as well. I mean, I grew up in a family where it wasn't that we were supposed to hide our feelings by any means. It's just that we showed love and we showed happiness and we showed care differently. But not once did we ever really, when I was little, not once did we ever really talk about how, feeling big, bad, well, bad, not really bad, but feeling those strong negative, let's say, emotions are also healthy until I was about 12 or 13. And I had kind of my first, say, mental health day. And I remember it so vividly because I woke up late and I was like, I need to go to school, but it was already like an hour past when I should be at school. And my mom said, no, you're having a mental health day today. She took the day off. She didn't wake me up, even though my brother and my sister went, and I somehow slept through them when they're like bulls in a china shop in the morning. Somehow they woke up and I didn't even notice. So I didn't go to school and we hung out and we just had, a fun, nice day of doing nothing, ice cream and pizza and all that. But it was the first time I heard mental health day. And it was the first time I really understood taking myself away from the pressures of things, including the pressures of how I'm feeling, right? And that need to be masculine or that need to not cry or whatever, whatever, whatever. And then the movement, I realize also the movement just helps. Like I need to move, I need to walk, I need to put my thoughts down on paper, and that's why I journal every morning, right? Even if it's just, here are 4 things that I am grateful for today. Here are a list of things like the direction I want to go in life. Here's 4 things, or etc. But again, with my depression, it always comes back to that problem of motivation when it
Mm-hmm.
gets really bad, right? Because when you're feeling low and you don't want to get out of the bed, how can I get myself to even write 4 things that I'm grateful for? Or how can I get myself to even go on a walk when I don't even want to put on pants?
Yeah.
And I do not live in a neighborhood where you can walk outside without pants on. I have lived in neighborhoods, but not currently.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like if I
Yeah.
was still in San Francisco, totally fine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
You fit
totally fine.
in.
Yeah.
Oh, yep, yep. Same over here. Oh man. That's hilarious. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit more of your writing journey? You know, from 20s to now present?
Yeah, I mean, my writing journey has definitely become more difficult as opposed to easier, I would say, only because of the time constraints, right? But I figured out new ways. I mean, that's the thing. You have to adapt to, if you want to do something, you have to adapt to the way to do it. And so during COVID, when things were locked down and I had lost my main travel writing job, because nobody could travel during COVID, so nobody cares about reading about traveling. I was like piecemealing together 6 different writing jobs. So all day I'm just writing, writing, writing for different things. And then uh, at the end of the day, I just didn't have it in me to write anything. But a friend of mine was like, "Oh, I'm doing this writing group, and we're only doing like 10-minute writes and then talking about it. But if I write with you too, then I'll get extra time and extra eyes on it." So I'm like, great, yeah, I can do 10 minutes. That's fine. And then 2 weeks later, she's like, okay, so now we're going to do an hour. I was like, no, no, I will still do 10 minutes. And that kind of became a way that I was able to reconnect with my writing. 10 minutes, 6 days or 7 days a week. And that's all it took. Because in that time, I didn't have the ability to, or I didn't have the time really to sit there and worry about what I'm going to write. I didn't have the
Mhm.
time to go back and edit and fix things and be like, well, this isn't right. And so I'll just change this. So I had to focus. I only had 10 minutes. So I had to focus. What do I want to say in this chapter or in this story? What's happening at this moment with this character? Maybe I'll have a prompt like, oh, a character goes to a diner and sees a flash of light. What happens? So, and that will keep me moving. But 10 minutes was just perfect. Like I put my daughter to bed. it was in between time. So I was like, my daughter's in bed. I have 10 minutes, maybe 20 if I'm feeling lucky. And then I go and hang out with my wife. And we can have our, and we can have our time together. So if I tried to do any more, it became so much pressure, right? Like giving myself an hour. I don't have an hour. I'm too tired for an hour. It's already 10 o'clock. Do I really want to be up till 11 o'clock writing and then still have to do my whole bedtime routine and then feel anxious and not be able to get to sleep? Or take 10 minutes at 9 o'clock at night and get it done. I
Hmm.
still have time to watch a half hour of TV or an hour of TV or whatever it is we're going to do together before I go to bed. So my writing journey has been very different. Again, in your 20s, things are different. Your life is different. You might not have a full-time job, or if you do, you have more energy to have a full-time job and then have happy hour with friends and then still write for 2 hours at the night before you get up all over again. I mean, everybody's sleep schedule is different. In my 20s, my sleep schedule, I could write till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and then get up and at 9 or 10 or whatever, even
No
though
big deal.
yeah, it's no problem. There's no problem. Grab a Red Bull and you're fine. Now, if I have a Red Bull, I'm up for 3 days and then I
Oh my
crash.
God.
Like there's no way. There's no way. But I found what works for me now and my lifestyle now. And that's the point. You just kind of have to figure out for writing, just like your kind of I can't remember what you called it. You didn't call it your emergency kit, but you call
Survival kit.
it survival kit. I was like, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Better. Right. Just like that, you have to figure, you have to play with what works for you specifically.
Hmm.
What works for me doesn't work for everybody. Maybe somebody doesn't want 10 minutes. They need that 10 minutes to get warmed up. Or maybe somebody doesn't like, I also like movement that helps me with my depression. It
Yep.
also helps spark my creativity. So walking around, going on a hike, being in nature, even sitting under a tree can help if I need to spark creativity. I was in Hawaii gratefully with my family. We had this lovely family trip and there was just so much so different that as I'm walking around, I get this great idea for it was a mix of being in Hawaii and my daughter, who's 4, said this random thing while playing. And she said, "Oh, this is a rainbow farmer and you need to garden the rainbows." And I was like, "Oh, that's a story." Okay. So it's like that's a story that I will be writing. And while I was there, being around nature and watching the water and seeing waterfalls, I'm like, I know exactly how the story needs to go. And I just need to put it all together. But it just whatever works for you, whatever sparks your imagination, whatever gets you moving, whatever gets you out of your funk, whatever gets you connected to emotionally. There's this great book. I want to plug my book, but unfortunately, this book is so much better than mine, but it's also nonfiction and it's called Your Brain on Art. And I just read it.
Okay.
And it talks a lot about how art in any facet, doing ceramics and using your hands, writing, painting, whatever it is, uh, helps so many people with mental challenges or difficulties or learning challenges, people who learn differently, people who have emotional disparities, whatever it is, because it takes you away. It kind of uses a different part of your brain, but then it connects all the synapses. It's amazing. I mean, they go into deep dives of what it is, but it's still accessible and approachable. And I was
Hmm.
just hooked. I read it, I listened on audiobook, and it was a great audiobook listen. And I just zoomed through it. But that's what writing does for me is it really helps ground me and gives me that creative freedom where I'm not beating myself up because I've done it enough where I'm not beating myself up about this chapter doesn't work or this character wouldn't do that because I know I'm going to go through it and I'm going to fix it.
I love that. And I love just um the writer's mind and all the different types of writing,
Yeah.
and the styles. And when we're talking about, you doing fiction, I mean, I just love it. Is there anything else that you would like my listeners to know about you?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Come find me, Douglas Weissman. On LinkedIn, I'm Douglas Weissman Storyteller. So you can't really ignore me or mistake me for somebody else either. I do have again Life Between Seconds coming out in paperback early next year. I also have another book coming out early next year. The release date isn't official yet, but it's called Girl in the Ashes, and it's about a serial killer in World War II Paris. So there's a
Ooh.
lot of fun there to be had.
I like that. That's different.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of jokes in the writer circle of Instagram where
Mhm.
it's like the FBI knocks on your door. You're like, why have you been looking at researching how to murder somebody and hide the body? It's like, I'm a writer. That's, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I will say with that book, your research had to be
yeah,
pretty interesting.
right. It's on one moment. It's like, oh, what kind of cheese were they eating in Paris during in 1940? And then the other one's like, how does a serial killer dispose of a body without anybody noticing? Really diverse searches on Google.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
It was my pleasure. I had just as much fun this time as the first time. So,
I did, but I'm really happy with this setup. I got to know you more and your journey in every single level, traveling as a book writer, so and your mental health journey. So thank you for being vulnerable with us and sharing your story too as well.
oh, thanks for letting me share it. I know for me, if I had access to this when I was younger, just understanding that
Mhm.
I wasn't alone, that other people were going through it, it would have meant a lot more to me than thinking I was an outcast, I was weird, and that only other weirdos, right, were going through the same thing. So I love.
Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry on that one because that's exactly, why I started the podcast is for that version of me that was in the room that didn't want to come out because for the past decade it was depression, and depression I treated her as my best friend. It was when anxiety showed up that I was like, oh no, we got to do something about this because I don't like this. I was just having a party with depression, like it was no big deal. But when anxiety showed up, and then I learned about anger issues and things like that, I was like, whoa, hold up. So then that's when I did all the stuff. And now I just want to bring people in with different perspective and different lifestyles and different things that they struggle or that they haven't struggled, but that they have tools and resources, because it's just a roadmap. My survival kit might not be for you, but you can create your own survival kit.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So, well, thank you so much.
No, thank you. I loved it. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Life with Francie podcast. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. You can find my show in all major platforms as well as my YouTube channel. On the show notes, you will find the links for my guests as well as mine. Awesome way to support us is to follow, like, subscribe, depending on the app. And if you would like to help the show, you can leave a review to help others find it. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day. Bye bye.